I stared at the red and white capsule in my calloused palm, while the freezing wind of a Chicago November cut through my thin jacket. My best friend, Miguel, a former Army medic who had seen things no man should ever see, had just spit out the white powder that was inside the pill, Ben. He whispered, his voice trembling, not from the cold, but from shock. This is not heart medication. This is flour. Just plain baking flour. My son Matt has a congenital heart defect. Without his medicine, his heart is a ticking time bomb. And my daughter-in-law, the woman who smiles at me while driving her Mercedes, the woman who manages his entire life, had just accidentally handed me the evidence of a murder in progress. But before I tell you how a simple lunchbox revealed a $5 million secret and forced a poor old construction worker to go to war with his own family, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. It brings warmth to this old man's heart to know I am not alone. My name is Ben. I am 70 years old, and my body feels every single one of those years. The jackhammer noise at the construction site was deafening, a relentless rhythm that pounded against my skull like a second heartbeat. It was a gray, miserable Tuesday in the suburbs of Chicago. The wind here does not just blow, it bites. It cuts through the layers of cheap flannel I wear, seeking out the ache in my lower back that never seems to go away anymore. I hefted another bag of cement onto my shoulder. 50 pounds. At my age, 50 pounds feels like 500. Every step was a negotiation with gravity. Every breath, a cloud of white vapor disappearing into the uncaring sky. You might wonder why a man of my age is breaking his back mixing concrete instead of sitting on a porch somewhere enjoying his golden years. The answer is simple. The answer, love. Blind, foolish, fatherly love. 2 years ago, I sold the house where I lived with my late wife for 40 years. Every corner of that house held a memory of her. The kitchen where she hummed while cooking the garden she tended with such care. But my son Matt, he had a dream. He wanted to start a tech company. He needed capital, so I sold everything. I gave him $200,000, every cent I had. Now Matt lives in a $1.2 million mansion in a gated community, and I live in a basement apartment that smells of mildew, working under the table as a laborer just to pay the rent. Do I regret it? Sometimes. When the cold gets into my bones and I have to eat instant noodles for the third night in a row. I miss my old fireplace. But then I think of Matt. He is my only child. He is all I have left of my wife. If he is successful, if he is happy, then my suffering is the price of admission. Or so I thought. I never complained. I never asked for anything back. I just wanted him to live the life I never could. Break time, the foreman yelled over the roar of the machinery. The silence that followed was heavy and sudden. I sat down on a stack of wooden pallets, my joints popping like dry twigs. Beside me sat Miguel. Miguel is a good man. He has eyes that are always scanning the perimeter, a habit from his days in Vietnam. He opened his paper bag, revealing a dry ham sandwich that looked as tired as we felt. I reached for the plastic bag my daughter-in-law Rachel had dropped off this morning. It was unusual for her to come by. She usually avoids the construction site, afraid the dust might settle on her expensive clothes. But she had pulled up this morning in her gleaming silver Mercedes, rolled down the window just an inch, and handed me the bag through the gap. "Sorry, Dad," she had said, her eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. "I packed your lunch in a hurry. Matt forgot his on the counter, and I was running late for yoga, so I just grabbed what was there and brought it to you. I did not question it. I was just grateful she acknowledged my existence." I opened the bag expecting my usual bologna sandwich or maybe some leftovers. Instead, I pulled out a lacquered black box. A Japanese bento box. It was sleek, shiny, and completely out of place in my dirty, cement-stained hands. I opened the lid. Inside there was no bologna. There was sushi. Fresh salmon, glistening orange roe, perfectly arranged vegetables cut into decorative shapes. It looked like a work of art. It looked like it cost more than I made in a week. Miguel let out a low whistle, leaning over to look. Look at you, Ben. Eating like an emperor while we eat like peasants. Since when do you eat raw fish? I laughed nervously, feeling a strange sense of shame for having such luxury in front of my friend. It is Matt's lunch, I said. Rachel must have swapped them by mistake. She said she grabbed the wrong one. I felt a pang of pride mixed with sadness. My son was eating well. He was successful. This was the life I bought for him. But tucked in the corner of the box beside a small container of soy sauce was a pill organizer, a small blue plastic container marked with the days of the week. Tuesday. That was today. Inside the Tuesday slot was a single red and white capsule. My heart skipped a beat. Matt has had a heart condition since he was a boy. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a big name for a terrible reality. His heart muscle is too thick. It has to work harder to pump blood. He needs his medication every single day at noon to regulate his heart rate. If he misses a dose, he gets dizzy. If he misses 2, he could go into cardiac arrest. I picked up the pill case, my fingers trembling slightly. I need to call him, I said, panic rising in my chest. He needs this. It is almost noon. If he does not take this, he could get sick. I reached for my old flip phone in my pocket. Miguel grabbed my wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong for a man of his age. Wait, Ben, he said. His tone was different. It wasn't his joking voice. It was his medic voice. Serious. Alert. What is it? I asked. Miguel's eyes were narrowed, focused intently on the capsule in my hand. Let me see that. I handed it to him. He held it up to the gray winter light, squinting. He shook it near his ear. Then he frowned. Something is wrong, Ben, he muttered. I used to hand out thousands of pills in the army. I know what medication feels like. The weight is off. It sounds too loose. And look at the seal. What are you talking about? I asked, feeling a cold dread that had nothing to do with the weather. It is just a pill. Miguel looked at me and I saw deep concern in his eyes. He did something that shocked me. He pulled the capsule apart. It opened easily, too easily. A fine white powder spilled onto his rough, dirty hand. It didn't look like the granular chemical compounds of a pharmaceutical drug. It looked soft, dusty. Miguel dipped a finger into the powder and touched it to his tongue. The seconds that followed stretched out into eternity. I watched his face change from curiosity to confusion, and then to absolute horror. He spat on the ground, wiping his tongue on his sleeve. Ben, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper so the other workers wouldn't hear. This is not medicine. This isn't chemical. It is flour. Just plain baking flour. The world stopped spinning. The noise of the city faded away. All I could hear was the rushing of blood in my ears. Flour. My son, who had a heart that could stop at any moment, was taking flour. And his wife, the woman who managed his diet, his schedule, his doctor's appointments. She was the one who prepared this. She was the one who handed it to me. I looked at the sushi, the symbol of their wealth. I looked at the white powder on Miguel's hand, the symbol of a lie. Why? Why would she give him a placebo? Unless she wanted the medicine to fail. Unless she wanted his protection to disappear. Unless she wanted his heart to stop. I gripped the empty capsule shell in my hand until it cracked. I was just an old man with a bad back and an empty bank account. I had no power. I had no connections. But in that moment, sitting on a pile of frozen lumber, I realized something terrifying. I was holding the evidence of an attempted murder, and the victim was my only son. My fingers fumbled with the old flip phone I had kept for years, the buttons worn down from use and covered in a fine layer of cement dust. I dialed Matt's number, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Ring, ring, ring. Then his voicemail. That cheerful, confident voice saying he was busy building the future. I hung up feeling a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the smell of the construction site. I had to call her. I had to call Rachel. She answered on the third ring. Her voice was not frantic or worried. It was crisp, professional, the voice of a woman who was in the middle of something far more important than a phone call from her father-in-law. "Hi, Dad," she said. "I hope you got the lunch. I am actually just stepping into my Pilates class, so I cannot talk long." I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. "Rachel," I said, my voice cracking in a way that embarrassed me. "The pills." Miguel looked at them. He opened one. "Rachel, it is flour. It is just baking flour. Why is Matt taking flour for his heart?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, a silence that stretched for 2, maybe 3 seconds. I expected a gasp. I expected her to scream, to say she had been scammed by a pharmacy, to tell me to call 911. But there was no panic. Instead, I heard a sigh. It was a long, heavy sigh, the kind a parent gives a toddler who has just asked a very stupid question. "Dad," she said, her tone dropping into that slow, condescending register she used whenever I asked about their finances or their lifestyle. "Please calm down. You are overreacting, and quite frankly, you are sounding a little hysterical." Hysterical. My son was taking baking ingredients for a life-threatening heart condition, and she called me hysterical. "Rachel," I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "It is flour. I know it is flour, Ben," she snapped, dropping the dad moniker. "It is a placebo. It is part of the protocol." Protocol. The word hung in the cold air between us. "Listen to me closely, because I do not have time to explain this twice," she continued, speaking as if she were reading from a medical journal. I was too uneducated to understand. "Matt is currently undergoing the Schneider protocol. It is a holistic cardiac detox program designed by Dr. Schneider in Manhattan. He is the top specialist in the country for non-invasive cardiac regeneration." I stood there blinking against the harsh wind. I had never heard of Dr. Schneider. I had never heard of cardiac detox. She continued, her voice gaining a rhythm of authority. "To prepare Matt's body for the new medication, we have to flush out the toxins from the generic beta blockers he has been taking for years. Those cheap pills you and his old doctors had him on were poisoning his liver. Dr. Schneider's regimen requires a 5-day cleansing period where he takes a placebo to reset his system." "A placebo," I whispered. "But his heart?" "His heart is fine, Dad," she cut me off. "The placebo allows his body to reach a baseline. Once the 5 days are up, we start him on nanoactive regulators. They are imported from Switzerland. They cost $2,000 a vial. Do you understand? We are not giving him cheap drugstore pills anymore. We are giving him the best science money can buy. This is nanotechnology, Ben. It is complex." I felt a flush of shame creep up my neck. Nanotechnology. Holistic detox. Switzerland. These were words from a world I did not belong to. I was a man who mixed concrete and carried bricks. What did I know about modern medicine? What did I know about the treatments rich people could afford? "But Rachel," I said, my voice smaller now, less certain. "Is it safe to stop the medicine completely?" "Of course it is safe," she said, sounding bored now. "Do you really think I would endanger my husband? Do you think I don't know what I am doing? I have been researching this for months. I handle his appointments. I handle his diet. I am saving his life, Ben. While you are worrying about flour, I am buying him a future." I looked at the white powder on the ground near Miguel's boots. It looked so harmless, yet so terrifying. "Now listen to me," Rachel said, her voice turning sharp like a blade hidden in silk. You are not to say a word of this to Matt. Why, I asked. If it is a good treatment, why can't I ask him? Because he is in a very delicate psychological state, she hissed. Dr. Schneider was very clear. Stress produces cortisol. Cortisol contradicts the effects of the detox. If Matt knows you are panicking, if he sees his father acting like the sky is falling, he will get stressed. His heart rate will go up. And if that happens, the treatment fails. Do you want to be the reason his treatment fails, Ben? Do you want to be the reason he gets sick? The manipulation was masterfully done. She had taken my fear for my son and turned it into a weapon against me. She had made my concern into a threat to his life. No, I said softly. I don't want that. Good, she said, her voice brightening instantly, returning to that fake, polished cheerfulness. Then just let me handle it. I am his wife. I love him. Trust me. Now enjoy the sushi. It is bluefin tuna, very expensive. I have to go. The line went dead. I stood there for a long time holding the silent phone. I felt small. I felt stupid. I felt like a relic from a bygone era who was trying to understand a world that had moved on without him. Maybe she was right. Maybe medicine had changed. Maybe rich people really did drink poison to cure themselves. I turned to Miguel. He was watching me, his dark eyes unblinking. I told him what she said. I repeated the words carefully. Holistic cardiac detox. Dr. Schneider. Nanoactive medication. Miguel did not look impressed. He did not look relieved. He looked at the empty capsule shell in my hand, and then he looked at me with a pity that hurt more than the cold. Ben, he said, his voice low and gravelly. I was a medic for 20 years. I have seen men die because they believed in witch doctors. I have seen good soldiers bleed out because they trusted a charm instead of a tourniquet. He stepped closer, putting a heavy hand on my shoulder. There is no such thing as a cardiac detox, Ben. The heart pumps blood. It does not need to be flushed like a radiator. And flour. Flour does not cure a thick heart muscle. If he stops his meds for 5 days, his heart is going to work overtime. It is going to strain. But she said it costs $2,000, I argued weakly. She said it is from Switzerland. Scammers always say it is from Switzerland, Miguel said. Look, I don't know your daughter-in-law. Maybe she believes this garbage. Maybe she is just a fool who reads too many blogs. But Ben, listen to your gut. Does this feel right to you? Does a box of sushi and a pill full of flour feel like medicine? I looked down at the bento box. The expensive fish was starting to look gray in the cold air. The perfectly cut vegetables looked like plastic. No, I whispered. It does not feel right. Then do not close your eyes, Miguel said. You do not have to fight her today. You do not have to scream. But do not close your eyes. I nodded. I put the empty capsule in my pocket. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a small, tattered notebook. It was where I wrote down my work hours, my debts, the little money I owed to the grocer. I licked the tip of my pencil. My hand was still shaking, but I forced myself to write. Day 1, November 12th. Fake medicine. Reason given. Detox. I closed the book and put it away. I would not call Matt. I would not yell at Rachel. Not yet. She thought I was a clueless old man who would believe anything if she used big words. She thought I was powerless. And maybe I was. But I was watching. And for the first time in my life, I was looking at my daughter-in-law, not as the woman who saved my son, but as the woman who might be burying him. That evening, I took the bus to the north side of the city, and the transition from the grit of the construction site to the manicured lawns of Highland Park always felt like crossing a border between two different countries. I stood before the 12-foot iron gates of my son's home and punched in the code I had used 1,000 times. 4190. The keypad beeped a harsh rejection tone and read, Access denied. I tried again. Denied. I called Rachel, but there was no answer. I called the house landline and heard nothing. I stood there for 15 minutes, shifting my weight from one aching leg to the other, while the security cameras stared down at me like mechanical vultures. Finally, the gate buzzed open with a loud click, and Rachel's voice came through the intercom, tinny and annoyed, saying, "Sorry, Dad, I forgot to tell you we changed the code for security reasons. Come on up." Walking into that house was like walking into a freezer because it cost $1.2 million, but it did not have a scent of warmth. The floors were polished marble that echoed every footstep, and the furniture was low, sleek Italian leather that looked beautiful but was impossible to sit on comfortably. I looked at the walls and remembered that when Matt lived with me, our walls were covered in photos of his graduation and our fishing trips and his mother laughing at a barbecue. Here the walls were bare except for massive, confusing, abstract paintings that looked like violent splashes of gray and black paint. There was no history here and no family, because it was a showroom for a life that nobody actually lived. Then I heard a shuffling sound from the top of the sweeping staircase, and I looked up and my breath caught in my throat. Matt was coming down, gripping the banister with a hand so white it looked like bone. This was my son, the boy who used to play linebacker in high school, and the young man who could carry 2 servers under his arms when he started his tech company. Now he moved like a man of 90, and his skin was not just pale, it was gray, the color of old ash. His eyes were sunken deep into his skull, surrounded by dark purple bruises of exhaustion. He took a step, paused to breathe, and then took another, and it took him a full minute just to reach the bottom floor. "Hey, Dad," he wheezed, trying to force a smile that looked more like a grimace of pain. "Sorry about the gate. Rachel is really worried about burglars lately." I walked over to him, fighting the urge to pick him up and carry him out of this cold mausoleum, and I hugged him. He felt frail like a bird made of hollow bones, and he smelled of stale sweat and sickness, masked poorly by some expensive room spray. "Let's sit down, son," I said, guiding him to one of the stiff leather chairs. "You look tired." Matt collapsed into the seat, closing his eyes for a moment, and whispered, "Yeah. It has been a rough week, just feeling drained. I think I caught a bug or something." I watched him carefully, because I needed to know the truth, and I needed to know if he was a part of this lie or just its victim. I leaned in close, keeping my voice casual, and said, "Well, that makes sense. Detoxes can be hard on the system. So how is that Dr. Schneider treating you? Is his protocol working yet?" Matt opened his eyes and looked at me with genuine confusion, and the fog in his gaze was terrifying. "Who?" he asked. "Dr. Schneider," I repeated, watching his face for any flicker of recognition, "the specialist in Manhattan, the one with the holistic program." Matt shook his head slowly, a look of bewilderment crossing his face, and said, "Dad, I don't know what you're talking about. I am still seeing Dr. Lee at the city hospital, and I am on the same beta blockers I have been on for 3 years. I haven't seen any specialist. It is just the weather, Dad. The pressure changes, mess with my heart rhythm. I just need to rest." A cold chill went down my spine that was colder than the marble floor, because he did not know, and he had absolutely no idea. Rachel wasn't just lying to me, she was lying to him. She was feeding him flour pills, telling him they were his regular medicine, and letting him believe his deteriorating health was just bad weather. She was gaslighting a dying man. Before I could say another word, the sharp click of heels on marble echoed through the hallway, and Rachel emerged from the kitchen like a storm front. She was wearing pristine white yoga clothes, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, and her eyes darted from Matt to me, narrowing instantly. "Oh, Dad, you are here," she said, her voice tight. "I didn't hear you come in." She walked straight to Matt, placing a hand on his shoulder that looked possessive, not affectionate, and said, "Matt, honey, why are you downstairs? You know what time it is." Matt looked up at her with adoration that broke my heart and said, "I just wanted to see Dad. Rach, he has been waiting outside." Rachel sighed, checking her diamond-encrusted watch, and said, "Well, it is 7 o'clock. It is time for your essential oil therapy. You know, we can't miss a session. if we want to align your energy. Come on up, you go. She pulled him up, and Matt swayed dizzy, and she caught him. But she didn't look at me, and she didn't ask if I wanted water. She just steered my son toward the stairs. Say goodbye to your father, Matt. He has to get home. It is a long drive to that part of town. Matt looked back at me, his eyes glassy, and said, Bye, Dad. Thanks for coming. I love you. I love you too, son, I choked out. I watched them ascend the stairs, the predator and her prey. And I stood alone in the vast, silent living room, my hands shaking. I looked down at the coffee table in front of me, which was made of glass and steel, and there was a stack of fashion magazines, and sitting right on top of them was a crumpled piece of paper. It was a receipt, and I picked it up, seeing it was from a high-end boutique on Michigan Avenue dated today. While my son was upstairs, barely able to breathe, thinking he was dying of natural causes, Rachel had been out shopping. I looked at the total and saw $5,400 for a handbag and a scarf. My son was dying for lack of medicine, and his wife was wearing his life insurance on her arm. I crumpled the receipt in my fist, and the suspicion that had started with a bento box was gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. This was not a mistake. This was an execution, and I was the only witness. That night, the receipt from the boutique sat on my wobbly kitchen table like a court summons, and I stared at it until the numbers blurred into black lines. $5,400 for a handbag, while my son was upstairs gasping for air in a house that cost more than I would earn in 10 lifetimes. Sleep was impossible because every time I closed my eyes, I saw Matt's gray face and the hollow look in his eyes when he told me he loved me. I paced the length of my tiny basement apartment, listening to the pipes rattle and the rats scratch inside the walls, and I realized that my poverty was not just a condition of my life, but a weapon Rachel was using against me. She knew I had no resources and no way to fight back, so she felt safe parading her cruelty right in front of my face. When the sun finally rose, it brought no warmth, only a pale gray light that made the world look old and tired. I did not go to the construction site that morning. Instead, I went to find Miguel. He was waiting for me at the bus stop, his breath puffing out in white clouds, and he did not ask why I wasn't in my work clothes because he saw the look on my face and he knew that today was not about mixing cement. We took 2 transfers to get to the university district where his niece Sarah lived in a cramped dorm room that smelled of instant coffee and old textbooks. Sarah was a third-year medical student with tired eyes and a mind like a steel trap, and she was the only person we knew who could navigate the digital world that Rachel used to hide her lies. I sat on the edge of her unmade bed, clutching my hat in my hands while she cleared a space on her desk, pushing aside stacks of anatomy diagrams. I told her everything, and I gave her the names Rachel had thrown at me like shields. Dr. Schneider in Manhattan, the holistic cardiac detox, the nanoactive regulators from Switzerland. Sarah adjusted her glasses and cracked her knuckles, and then she started typing, and the only sound in the room for the next 20 minutes was the furious clicking of her keyboard and the hum of her computer fan. I watched the reflection of the screen in her glasses, hoping for something, anything, that would prove me wrong, because God help me, I wanted to be wrong. I wanted there to be a miracle cure. I wanted Rachel to be just a gullible fool who spent too much money on quackery rather than a monster. But as the minutes ticked by, Sarah's frown deepened, and the silence in the room grew heavy and suffocating. Finally, she stopped typing and spun her chair around to face us. "Ben," she said, and her voice was soft, but it held the hard edge of absolute certainty. "I have run these names through the National Provider Identifier database, which lists every licensed physician in the United States. I have checked the American Board of Medical Specialties, and I even ran a search on the international registries, just in case." She took a breath and looked me in the eye. "There is no cardiologist named Schneider in Manhattan who specializes in holistic detox. There is a Dr. Schneider in New York, but he is a plastic surgeon, and his license is currently suspended because he is being sued for malpractice after 3 botched facelifts. He has nothing to do with hearts. He fixes noses for socialites." I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach, but I had to ask about the medicine. What about the drugs? I asked the nanoactive regulators. She said they cost $2,000 a vial. She said they were from Switzerland. Sarah shook her head slowly and turned the screen so I could see the empty search results. I checked the FDA database for approved drugs, and I checked the European Medicines Agency list for experimental treatments. Nanoactive is not a medication, Ben. It is a marketing term used in high-end anti-aging face creams. It does not exist in cardiology. There is no miracle drug. There is no protocol. It is all a lie. Every single word of it. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. It wasn't just a misunderstanding, and it wasn't just alternative medicine gone wrong. It was a complete fabrication constructed with words that sounded expensive and scientific to keep a simple old man and a sick husband in the dark. Rachel hadn't been scammed by a fake doctor. She was the scammer. She had invented a doctor. She had invented a cure. And she was using these inventions to justify taking my son off the only medicine that was keeping him alive. As the truth settled over me like a shroud, my mind drifted back 5 years to a day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life. It was Matt and Rachel's wedding day. It was a lavish affair held at a country club I could never afford to join, paid for largely by the check I had written them after selling my house. I remembered feeling out of place in my rented tuxedo, standing in the corner, while Rachel's friends swirled around in silk and chiffon, laughing with mouths full of champagne. I had gone to the restroom to splash water on my face, feeling overwhelmed by the heat and the noise. As I was coming out, I heard voices in the hallway just around the corner. It was Rachel and her maid of honor. They were giggling, the sharp, cruel sound of people who think they are better than everyone else. I stopped to fix my tie, and then I heard Rachel's voice clear as a bell. "He is sweet, isn't he?" her friend had said, referring to Matt. Rachel had laughed a low, throaty sound. "He is useful," she had replied. "He has potential, and he is obsessed with me, but God, his family is exhausting. Did you see his father? He looks like he just walked off a tractor. I can't stand that smell. It is the smell of poverty. But don't worry. Once Matt's company takes off and we have the money, we will move to the city and leave the baggage behind." I had stood there, frozen, my hand on my tie, feeling the blood drain from my face. Baggage. I was the baggage. The poverty she couldn't stand was the sweat on my back that had paid for her wedding dress. I had walked away, then telling myself it was just wedding jitters, telling myself she didn't mean it, because I wanted my son to be happy. I had buried that memory deep under layers of denial and hope. But now, sitting in this dorm room with the evidence of her treachery glowing on a computer screen, that memory clawed its way back to the surface. She had told me who she was 5 years ago, and I hadn't listened. She hated poverty so much that she would do anything to escape it. And now Matt wasn't just her husband, he was her failing investment. His company wasn't doing as well as they pretended. I knew that from the whispers in town. The debt was mounting. The lifestyle was unsustainable. And then the pieces clicked together in a pattern so horrific, it made me want to vomit. Matt was sick. He was weak. If he died of natural causes, if his heart simply gave out because of stress or weather, as she claimed, she would be the grieving widow. She would inherit everything. She would be free of the debt, free of the husband she no longer respected, and free of the father-in-law she despised. She wasn't just waiting for him to die. She was actively accelerating the process. She was stripping away his defenses, one flower pill at a time, weakening his heart muscle until it would simply snap under the strain of existing. It was a slow-motion murder designed to look like a tragedy. No bullets, no poison. Just the absence of the thing he needed to live. She was killing him by subtraction. I stood up and my knees cracked, but I didn't feel the pain. I felt a cold, burning rage that started in my gut and spread to my fingertips. I thanked Sarah, and I walked out of the room with Miguel right behind me. We stepped out onto the street, and the city noise washed over us, but I heard none of it. I looked at my hands, the hands that had built houses and carried cement and held my son when he was a baby. They were old hands, but they were still strong. "She thinks I am a clueless old man," I said to Miguel, my voice steady for the first time in days. "She thinks I am stupid, because I don't know big words. She thinks she can starve my son's heart and buy handbags with his life." Miguel lit a cigarette and looked at me waiting. "She wants to kill my son," I said, and I clenched my fist until the nails dug into my palm. "I will not let her. I don't care if I have to burn her world to the ground. I am going to save him." Tuesday morning arrived under a blanket of heavy gray clouds that matched the feeling in my gut. I knew Rachel's schedule better than she realized. Every Tuesday at 10 o'clock sharp, she attended a private yoga session at a studio in Gold Coast. It was a ritual she never missed, a sacred time for her to center herself while my son lay dying in her house. This was my window. I had called the house landline earlier that morning, leaving a message for the housekeeper, Maria, saying I was coming over to fix the dripping faucet in the guest bathroom that Matt had mentioned weeks ago. It was a flimsy excuse, but Maria knew me. She knew I was handy, and more importantly, she knew I was harmless. Just the old man coming to tinker with the plumbing. I parked my rusted truck 2 blocks away and walked to the house, my tool belt heavy around my waist. It was not just filled with wrenches and screwdrivers today. In my pocket, I had my old smartphone, the camera lens carefully wiped clean with my shirt tail. I approached the service entrance, my heart thudding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Maria opened the door, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked tired. Even the help in this house seemed drained of life. "Mr. Ben," she said, offering a small, weary smile. "Mrs. Rachel is out. Mr. Matt is sleeping. He had a bad night." I nodded, stepping into the warmth of the laundry room. "I know, Maria, I won't disturb him. I will just be in and out to fix that leak. You go on with your work. Don't mind me." She nodded gratefully and returned to the kitchen, where the hum of the dishwasher provided a layer of white noise. I waited until she was out of sight, then I moved. I did not go to the guest bathroom. I went straight to the stairs. My work boots felt like lead weights on the plush carpet runners. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot in the silent house. I reached the top of the landing and paused outside the master bedroom. The door was ajar. I pushed it open and slipped inside. The room was vast, smelling of lavender and expensive silk. It was a shrine to Rachel's taste. Everything was beige, cream, and gold. It was beautiful and suffocating. I walked past the king-sized bed where Matt usually slept, but he wasn't there. He was likely in the guest room, exiled because his coughing disturbed her sleep. I checked the hallway. Clear. I moved to her vanity table. It was an antique piece, French provincial, covered in crystal perfume bottles and jars of cream that cost more than my monthly rent. I knew Rachel. She was arrogant. She was the kind of person who didn't use a safe because she truly believed no one would dare touch her things. She believed she was untouchable. I started opening drawers. Lipsticks, jewelry, scarves, nothing. My hands were shaking so bad I almost knocked over a bottle of Chanel. Then I heard it, the whine of a vacuum cleaner starting up in the hallway. Maria. She was cleaning the upstairs. Panic seized my throat. If she found me rummaging through Rachel's things, she would call her. And if Rachel knew I was snooping, the game was over. I froze, listening to the rhythmic swoosh of the vacuum getting closer. I had maybe 5 minutes before she reached this room. I looked at the vanity again. There had to be something. I ran my hand underneath the main drawer. I felt a small latch, a hidden compartment. Of course. It was theatrical, just like her. I pressed the latch and a shallow drawer slid out silently from the bottom. Inside there was no jewelry. There was paper. A thick stack of documents held together by a heavy metal clip. I lifted them out my fingers, leaving sweat marks on the crisp white paper. I opened the folder. The first thing I saw was a credit card statement. It was stamped in bold red letters. Final notice. Past due. I scanned the numbers. $52,000. She was maxed out. There were letters from collection agencies, threats of legal action, notices of default on personal loans I didn't even know existed. So this was the lifestyle. It was a house of cards built on debt and delusion. She wasn't just maintaining an image, she was drowning. But debt wasn't a crime. Being bad with money didn't make you a murderer. I kept digging. Underneath the financial ruin, there was a blue folder with a silver logo I recognized. It was a major insurance firm. I opened it. It was a life insurance policy for Matthew Vales. The date on the signature line was from 6 months ago. My eyes scanned the coverage amount. I had to blink and look again because my brain refused to process the zeros. $5 million. $5 million payable upon death. I felt the blood drain from my face. $5 million was not just a safety net. It was a lottery win. It was freedom from the debt. Freedom from the failing husband. Freedom to start over in the luxury she felt she deserved. But it was the next page that made my knees buckle. There were riders attached to the policy-specific conditions and clauses. One paragraph was circled in red ink, likely by the agent during their meeting, or perhaps by Rachel herself as she studied her investment. The clause read, accelerated death benefit and accidental death exclusions. But the part that made my stomach turn was a specific notation regarding pre-existing conditions. It stated that full payout 100% of the $5 million was guaranteed if the cause of death was determined to be natural causes stemming from pre-existing cardiovascular failure, provided there was documented adherence to a treatment plan. I read it again. Documented adherence to a treatment plan. The pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a physical blow. The flower pills, the fake doctor, the holistic protocol. It wasn't just about killing him. It was about killing him in the right way. If she simply poisoned him or if he died of neglect, the insurance might investigate. But if she created a paper trail of a loving wife seeking advanced, albeit alternative treatment for a sick husband, and he died despite her heroic efforts, it would look like a tragedy. It would look like natural heart failure. She was creating a narrative. The expensive bento box lunches, the trips to the non-existent specialist, the diary she probably kept detailing his symptoms. It was all a performance for the insurance adjusters. She was not just murdering my son. She was directing a play where his death was the grand finale and the $5 million check was the standing ovation. The vacuum cleaner bumped against the bedroom door. I jumped, nearly dropping the file. Maria was right outside. I could hear her humming to herself. I had seconds. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely unlock the screen. I laid the documents out on the vanity chair. Click. The credit card debt. Click. The policy face sheet showing the $5 million. Click. The clause about heart failure. Click. The signature page with Matt's weak, shaky scrawl next to Rachel's firm, aggressive signature. I shoved the papers back into the folder. I slid the folder back into the hidden drawer and clicked it shut. I rearranged the perfume bottles to exactly where they had been. I stood up and wiped my face with my sleeve. I was sweating cold, clammy sweat. I moved to the bathroom just as the bedroom door pushed open wider. Maria stepped in the vacuum, roaring. She saw me standing in the doorway of the ensuite bathroom, a wrench in my hand. "Oh, Mr. Ben," she shouted over the noise, startling. "You scared me." "Sorry, Maria," I shouted back, holding up the wrench. "Just finished." That leak was a stubborn one, but I got it. She smiled and nodded, turning off the machine. "You are a good father," she said in the sudden silence. "Always taking care of things." I forced a smile that felt like a mask of cracked clay. I try, Maria. I try. I walked past her, my legs feeling like jelly. I walked down the stairs, past the cold, abstract art, past the lie of their perfect life. I walked out the back door and into the gray morning. I didn't stop walking until I reached my truck. I sat inside and locked the doors. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photos. The images were grainy but legible. $5 million. I stared at the house through the windshield. It didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like a slaughterhouse. Rachel wasn't just a cruel woman. She was a businesswoman. And my son was her asset. She had calculated his value, deducted his cost, and decided it was time to liquidate. She was investing in his death. I started the engine. The old truck sputtered and coughed, coming to life. I gripped the steering wheel. I had the motive. I had the method. But I still didn't have the weapon. I knew she was giving him fake pills, but I needed the real ones. I needed to know where she hid the medicine that could save him, or if she had destroyed it. And more importantly, needed to get him out of that house before the final act of her play began. I drove away, leaving the mansion behind. I was not a clueless old man anymore. I was a father with a target, and I was going to hunt her down. I sat on the edge of my sagging mattress with the phone in my hand, and the image of that $5 million insurance policy burned into my retinas. I had the motive and I had the method, but in the eyes of the law, I was still just a senile old man making wild accusations against a grieving wife. If I went to the police now, Rachel would simply say I was confused or jealous. She would claim the flower pills were a mistake by the pharmacy. Or worse, she would flush the real medication down the toilet and claim Matt had been refusing to take it himself. She was smart, and she was ruthless, and she was 5 steps ahead of me. I needed physical evidence. I needed to find where she was hiding the real nitroglycerin pills that could save my son's life. And to do that, I needed unfettered access to that house. I needed to get inside when she wasn't there, and I needed to do it without breaking a window or alerting the security system she was so proud of. I remembered the keychain I had seen in her purse months ago. It was a distinctive brass set with a heavy leather fob embossed with the Mercedes logo. She kept the spare house key on it, along with the key to her yoga studio locker. I opened my junk drawer, which was a graveyard of old screws and rusty tools, and I dug until my fingers closed around an old brass key from a padlock I lost years ago. It was roughly the same size and shape as a standard house key. I found an old leather strap and attached it. It wasn't a perfect match, but in a crowded purse amidst lipstick tubes and receipts, it would pass for a few hours. Now came the hard part. I had to hurt myself. I had to play the part she had written for me, the frail, clumsy old man who was a burden to everyone. I stood at the bottom of the short flight of stairs leading down to my basement apartment. I took a deep breath and I threw myself forward. I didn't hold back. My shoulder slammed into the drywall and my hip hit the concrete floor with a sickening thud. Pain exploded up my side, hot and jagged. It wasn't fake pain. It was real, and it took my breath away. I lay there for a moment groaning, letting the agony wash over me until tears pricked my eyes. Good. The tears would help. I pulled the phone from my pocket with trembling hands and dialed Rachel. She answered on the 4th ring, and I could hear the background noise of a busy cafe. "What is it, Ben?" she asked, and her tone was pure irritation, clipped and impatient. "Rachel." I gasped, forcing my voice to sound weaker than it was. "I fell. I think I broke something. I am at the apartment. I can't get up, please." Matt isn't answering. There was a huff of breath on the other end. "Seriously, Ben," she said. "I am in the middle of a meeting with my event planner. Can't you call Miguel? He is working." I lied. "Please, Rachel. It hurts. I can't move my leg." "Fine," she snapped. "I am coming. But if this is just a bruise, I am going to be very unhappy. Do not move." She hung up. I lay on the cold floor waiting. The pain in my hip was throbbing a dull ache that radiated down to my knee, but I welcomed it. It was the price of admission. 20 minutes later, I heard the roar of her engine outside. She didn't knock. She used the key Matt had given her years ago and threw the door open. The silhouette of her designer coat, framed against the gray light of the hallway, looked like a dark angel. She walked down the stairs, carefully wrinkling her nose at the smell of damp and poverty. She saw me lying on the floor, clutching my leg, and she didn't rush to my side. She didn't kneel down to check my pulse. She stood over me, hands on her hips, shaking her head. "Honestly, Ben," she sighed, "you need to be more careful. We don't have time for this. Matt is sick, and now I have to babysit you too." "I am sorry, Rachel," I whispered, squeezing my eyes shut. "I just slipped. I need a doctor." She rolled her eyes and looked around the room with disdain. She spotted the worn beige sofa, the only piece of furniture in the living room that wasn't broken. She walked over to it and dropped her handbag onto the cushion. It was a Birkin bag, one of those bags that cost more than a car. She dropped it carelessly because in her mind she was safe here. Who was going to touch it? The crippled old man on the floor. "I need water," I croaked, pointing a shaking finger toward the kitchenette. "Please, Rachel. My throat is dry." She let out a groan of frustration. "Fine. But then we are going to the urgent care clinic down the street. I am not spending all day in an emergency room." She turned her back to me and walked into the small kitchen area. I heard the squeak of the faucet handle and the splash of water into a glass. The water pressure in this building was terrible, so it would take her at least 20 seconds to fill the glass. 20 seconds. That was all I had. The moment her back was turned, the frail old man vanished. I ignored the screaming pain in my hip. I rolled onto my good side and pushed myself up. I moved with a speed that would have shocked her. I lunged for the sofa. My hand dove into her open bag. The leather was soft like butter. My fingers brushed past a wallet, a phone, a tube of lipstick, and then I felt it. The cold metal of keys. I grabbed the heavy brass set. I pulled them out. In the same motion, I dropped my dummy set into the bag, pushing them deep into the side pocket, where she wouldn't see them immediately. I clenched her real keys in my fist and shoved them into the pocket of my work trousers. I threw myself back onto the floor, landing in the exact same position, just as the water faucet squeaked off. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. The pain in my hip flared up again, blinding and white-hot, but I forced my face into a mask of pathetic misery. Rachel walked back into the room holding the glass of water. She looked at me and then she glanced at her bag. It was sitting exactly where she left it. She didn't notice a thing. She didn't see the slight shift in position. She didn't see that the predator had just been robbed. "Here," she said, thrusting the glass at me. "Drink this, then we are going." I drank the water, my hands shaking partly from the act, and partly from the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Thank you, Rachel," I said, handing the glass back. "You are a good daughter-in-law." She didn't smile. She just grabbed my arm and hauled me up. Her grip was strong, surprisingly strong. She half dragged me up the stairs and out to her car. She didn't offer to support my weight. She just opened the door and waited for me to climb in. The ride to the urgent care was silent. She texted on her phone the entire time, driving with one knee. When we got to the clinic, she dropped me at the entrance. "I will wait here," she said, not turning off the engine. "Go in. Get it x-rayed. If it is broken, call me. If it is just a bruise, take a taxi back. I have things to do." I nodded and limped into the clinic. I didn't need an x-ray. I knew it was just a severe bruise. I waited in the lobby for 10 minutes, watching her car through the glass doors. Finally, she peeled away tires, screeching, impatient to get back to her life of spending money she didn't have. I walked out of the clinic without seeing a doctor. The pain in my hip was a constant throb, but it felt like a victory medal. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the keys. The heavy brass shone under the streetlights. There was the Mercedes fob. There was the house key. I held it tight, feeling the cold metal bite into my palm. This was not just a key. This was a weapon. Rachel thought she had secured her future by locking me out and locking Matt in. She thought she was the gatekeeper, but she had just handed the keys to the castle to the enemy. I hailed a taxi not to go home but to go back to the hardware store near my job site. I needed to make a copy. I would return her set later somehow, maybe slip it back into her purse or drop it under her car seat so she would think she lost it. But for now, I had what I needed. I looked at the key and whispered to the empty air. "You opened the door to hell, Rachel. Now I am coming inside." The game had changed. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was hunting. And tomorrow, when she was busy spending my son's life insurance, I would be inside her sanctuary, tearing it apart until I found the cure. The night of the charity gala arrived like a funeral procession wrapped in sequins and silk. From the vantage point of Miguel's battered sedan parked down the street, I watched them leave. Matt looked like a ghost, draped in a tuxedo that was now 2 sizes too big for his wasting frame. He leaned heavily against the doorframe as they waited for the town car, his face slick with sweat despite the evening chill. Rachel, in contrast, was radiant. She wore a red dress that looked like spilled blood diamonds glittering at her throat and ears, her hand gripping Matt's arm not to support him, but to propel him forward. She was parading her dying husband in front of their social circle, playing the role of the devoted, suffering wife to perfection. As the car pulled away, swallowing them into its plush darkness, I felt a surge of hatred so potent it nearly choked me. She was killing him, and tonight she was making him dance on his own grave. I waited until the taillights disappeared around the curve of the drive. Then I looked at Miguel. He nodded once, his face grim in the dashboard lights. "Go," he said softly. "I will watch the street. If anyone comes, I honk twice. You have 20 minutes before the private security patrol comes by." I slipped out of the car and moved through the shadows of the neighbors' hedges. The copy of the key I had made burned in my pocket. I reached the back door, the same one I had used years ago, when I helped them move in back when I still had hope for this family. My hand trembled as I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a smooth, silent click. The door swung open, and I stepped into the belly of the beast. The house was silent, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with the presence of their lies. The air conditioning hummed a low, expensive note. I didn't turn on any lights. The moonlight filtering through the massive windows provided enough illumination, casting long, distorted shadows across the marble floors. I moved quickly, ignoring the ache in my hip from my staged fall. I had a mission. I went straight to the master bedroom. It smelled of her perfume and his sickness. I started in the bathroom, ripping open the cabinet doors. I checked behind the expensive face creams, inside the boxes of cotton swabs, even inside the tank of the toilet. Nothing. Just bottles of mouthwash and headache pills. I moved to the nightstands. I pulled out drawers, dumping their contents onto the bed. Books, reading glasses, a sleep mask. No medicine. Panic began to rise in my chest, a cold tide threatening to pull me under. I had to find it. I knew she wouldn't throw the real medicine away. She needed it as a failsafe, or perhaps just as a trophy of her control. If Matt collapsed too soon before the insurance timeline was met, she might need to revive him. She was calculating, not reckless. I stood in the center of the room, breathing hard, forcing my mind to work. Where does a woman like Rachel hide the things that matter to her? Not in a safe. She didn't trust banks or metal boxes. She trusted things she could touch, things that represented her status. I looked at the walk-in closet. The door was slightly ajar. I walked inside. It was larger than my entire apartment. Rows of designer dresses hung like colorful carcasses. Shelves of handbags lined the walls. And on the far wall, a floor-to-ceiling display of shoes, dozens of them, hundreds of thousands of dollars in leather and satin. This was her temple. This was what she was trading my son's life for. I started checking the shelves. I looked inside handbags, felt the linings of coats. Nothing. Then my eyes fell on the shoeboxes stacked on the highest shelf. They were red, distinctive. Christian Louboutin. I remembered her bragging about a pair she bought in Paris. They were her favorites. She never wore them because she said the pavement in Chicago would ruin the red soles. I dragged a small ottoman over and climbed up my joints, protesting. I pulled down the top box. It felt heavy, heavier than a pair of shoes should be. I sat on the floor and lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in a layer of soft white tissue paper and then swaddled in a Hermès silk scarf, were 5 amber bottles. I unwrapped them, my heart pounding against my ribs. I held one up to the moonlight. The label was clear. Nitroglycerin. Prescription strength. Refilled 2 days ago. I checked the other bottles. Beta blockers. Blood thinners. Everything he needed, everything she had stolen from his body. I sat there for a moment, clutching the bottles, tears of rage stinging my eyes. She had hidden his life in a shoebox. She had buried his salvation under layers of vanity. I wanted to scream. I wanted to take the pills and run to the gala to throw them in her face in front of everyone. But that wouldn't save him. That would just cause a scene she could explain away. She would say I stole them. She would say I was senile. Matt would be confused and she would take him home and find a new way to kill him. Number 1. I needed something stronger than a confrontation. I needed a resurrection. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small plastic bag I had brought with me. Inside was the flour I had bought at the corner store. I stood up and walked to the bathroom. I found the daily pill organizer Matt used, the one sitting innocently by the sink. I popped open the lids for the next week. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. All of them filled with the red and white capsules she had carefully prepared with baking powder. I opened the capsules one by one, dumping the flour into the sink and washing it away. It vanished in a white swirl. Then I took the real bottles I had found in the closet. I opened them. My hands were steady now, guided by a cold, surgical precision. I carefully filled the empty gelatin shells with the real medication. I packed them tight, just like a pharmacist would. I snapped them shut. I placed the real pills back into the organizer. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I didn't stop there. I took the remaining real pills from the amber bottles and put them in a small plastic baggie which I hid deep in my sock. Then I filled the amber bottles from the shoebox with my own flour. I capped them and wrapped them back in the silk scarf, placing them exactly as I had found them, in the Louboutin box. I climbed back up and put the box on the shelf. I smoothed the carpet where I had sat. I wiped the bathroom counter. I looked at the pill organizer one last time. To the naked eye, nothing had changed. But fundamentally, everything was different. Tomorrow morning, when Rachel handed Matt his pill with a fake smile and a glass of water, she wouldn't be poisoning him. She would be saving him, and she wouldn't even know it. I imagined the moment. Matt taking the pill, the medicine dissolving in his stomach, entering his bloodstream, the nitrates expanding his blood vessels, easing the strain on his heart, the color returning to his cheeks, the breath coming easier. And then I imagined Rachel. I imagined her watching him, waiting for the decline, waiting for the crash that would lead to the hospital and the insurance payout. I imagined her confusion when he didn't get worse. I imagined her panic when he started to get better. She would doubt herself. She would check her stash in the shoebox and find the flour I had left her. She would think she made a mistake. She would think she was losing her mind. The psychological warfare had begun. She wanted to play God with my son's life. Fine. But now I was the one writing the script. I slipped out of the closet and through the bedroom, moving like a shadow. I locked the back door behind me and melted into the bushes just as headlights swept across the front lawn. The security patrol. Right on time. I crawled through the hedge and sprinted to Miguel's car, diving into the passenger seat, just as the patrol car cruised past. Miguel looked at me, his eyes wide. "Did you get it?" he asked. I looked back at the dark house, standing silent and imposing against the night sky. I patted my pocket where the extra real pills were hidden, and I thought of the bomb I had just planted in their bathroom. Better, I said, my voice rough with the adrenaline of the hunt. "I didn't just get it, Miguel. I gave it back. The game has begun, daughter, and you have no idea who you are playing against." 4 days passed in a silence that felt heavy and thick like the humid air before a thunderstorm. I spent those days sitting by my phone in the basement, staring at the peeling paint on the walls and waiting for the other shoe to drop. I knew I had bought my son time, but I did not know how much. Every time the phone rang, my heart jumped into my throat, fearing it would be the hospital or worse, the police. But on the 4th morning, the phone buzzed with a vibration that felt different, somehow lighter. I looked at the caller ID and saw Matt's name. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for a weak, wheezing voice for a plea for help. "Hello, Dad." The voice that came through the speaker was not the voice of the dying man I had seen on the stairs. It was strong. It had bass. It had life. It was the voice of the boy who used to captain the football team. I almost dropped the phone. "Matt," I stammered. "How are you, son?" "Dad, it is the strangest thing," he said, and I could hear the smile in his words. "I don't know what kicked in, but the last few days I feel incredible. My chest feels light. The pressure is gone. I actually slept through the night without waking up gasping for air. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for a week." The real medicine was working. The nitrates were doing their job, opening his veins, letting the blood flow, feeding his starving heart. "That is wonderful news, son," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "Maybe that detox is finally working." "I think so," Matt said, sounding energetic. "You won't believe this, but I just came back from a run. Just a light jog around the block, maybe 15 minutes. But Dad, I haven't been able to walk to the mailbox without getting dizzy for months. Today I felt like I could have kept going." A run. He had gone for a run. My heart swelled with a pride so fierce it hurt, but then I heard it. A loud, sharp crash in the background. The unmistakable sound of glass shattering against a hard floor, followed by a gasp. "Rachel," I heard Matt say, his voice turning away from the phone. "Honey, are you okay?" Then I heard her voice. It was distant but shrill, cutting through the background noise like a siren. "You ran!" she screamed. Her voice was trembling, not with relief, but with something that sounded terrifyingly like panic. "Are you insane, Matt? You went running. The doctor said you need absolute bed rest. You could have killed yourself." I pressed the phone harder against my ear, picturing the scene. Rachel standing in their pristine kitchen, staring at a husband who was supposed to be withering away, but was instead standing there flushed with health and vitality. She must have dropped a glass when she saw him come in, sweating and smiling. Her plan was falling apart right in front of her eyes. The narrative she was building for the insurance company, the story of the sick husband who tried everything but failed, was being rewritten by the truth of his recovery. "Babe, relax." Matt laughed, and it was a rich, full sound. "I promise I am fine. I feel the medicine kicking in. I feel great." "Really? You are not fine," she snapped, her voice rising an octave. "This is just a temporary surge. It is dangerous. You are straining your heart. Go upstairs right now. You need to lie down. I am calling Dr. Schneider." "No, don't call him," Matt said firmly. "Let me enjoy this, Rachel. I feel alive for the first time in a year." I heard some shuffling, and then Matt came back on the line. "Sorry, Dad." Rachel is just worried. She is terrified I am going to push it too hard. She loves you, I lied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. She just wants you to be safe. I know, Matt sighed. But seriously, Dad, we should go fishing soon. I think I am going to be up for it. We will, son, I promised. We will go fishing. We hung up, and I sat there in the silence of my room, feeling a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I had won the battle, but the war had just become infinitely more dangerous. Rachel was scared now, and a scared predator is an unpredictable predator. She had seen that her slow poison of neglect wasn't working. She had seen him getting better. What would she do next? Would she double the dose of the fake pills? Would she find the real ones I hid and destroy them? Or would she realize that time was running out and resort to something faster, something more violent? I couldn't just sit here and wait for her next move. I needed to know more. I needed to understand the full picture. The $5 million policy was the goal, but I still didn't understand the why. Why now? Why was she so desperate? There was a knock on my door. It was a courier. He handed me a thick manila envelope and asked for a signature. It was from the private investigator I had hired with the last scraps of my savings. I had asked him to dig into Rachel's past, into her finances, into anything that could explain this madness. I took the envelope inside and tore it open, expecting to find photos of a lover or records of a secret gambling addiction belonging to Rachel. I pulled out the stack of papers and spread them on the table. My eyes scanned the summary page, and my confusion turned into a different kind of horror. The report was full of red ink. Debts. Massive debts. But the name at the top of the credit reports and the loan documents wasn't Rachel Vales. It was Matthew Vales. I blinked, rubbing my eyes, thinking I had misread it. But there it was, in black and white. My son Matt, the successful tech entrepreneur, the boy I was so proud of, was drowning. But not in business loans. The report detailed a series of high-risk transfers to offshore accounts linked to online gambling platforms, cryptocurrency speculation, and forex trading sites that were little more than scams. Matt hadn't just lost money. He had hemorrhaged it. He had bet the house, the company, and his future on digital coins and poker games. And then I saw the most terrifying part. A list of recent inquiries and liens from organizations that didn't have bank logos. They were LLCs with vague names registered in places like Nevada and Delaware. The investigator had added a handwritten note in the margin. These are not banks, Ben. These are sharks, hard money lenders, the kind that break legs when you miss a payment. The total debt listed at the bottom of the page was staggering. $300,000. And that was just the principal. With the exorbitant interest rates these shadow lenders charged, the real number was likely double that. I sat back in my chair, the room spinning. I had thought Rachel was the only villain in this story. I had thought she was a greedy woman, killing a successful man for his fortune. But the truth was messier, darker. Matt was broke. His company was a shell. The luxury house, the cars, the clothes, it was all a facade funded by borrowed money and dangerous promises. This changed everything. If Matt was the one in debt, why was Rachel killing him? If he died, the debts wouldn't just disappear, unless she didn't know about them. Or unless she did know and realized that the only way to escape the hole he had dug for them was to cash in the life insurance. $5 million would pay off the sharks, pay off the mortgage, and leave her with millions to start over. But there was something else, something that nagged at the back of my mind. If Matt was in debt to dangerous people, why wasn't he panicking? Why was he playing the role of the sick invalid? Unless he didn't know the extent of the danger, or unless he had given up. I looked at the photo of my son attached to the report. He looked happy in the picture taken a year ago. Now I realized that smile was a mask hiding a desperate secret. I had been fighting to save his heart, but now I realized I had to save him from his own mistakes too. The enemy wasn't just inside the house. The enemy was knocking at the door, holding promissory notes and baseball bats. Rachel was trying to kill him to get the money, but these lenders, they might kill him just to send a message. I grabbed my coat. I couldn't wait anymore. I had to go back. I had to watch the house. Because if Rachel was desperate before now that she saw her meal ticket getting healthy, she might decide to cut her losses. And if the sharks found out he was broke, they might decide to collect in blood. I was walking into a crossfire. On one side, a wife with a murder plot. On the other, a son with a gambling addiction and a death wish he didn't even know he had signed. And in the middle was me, an old man with a wrench and a pocket full of pills trying to hold back the avalanche. I stepped out into the cold night air, knowing that the next 24 hours would decide who lived and who died. The cold night air did little to cool the burning panic in my chest as I stood on the sidewalk outside my basement apartment. I was still clutching the report about Matt's financial ruin when my phone buzzed again. It was not a call this time. It was a text message from an unknown number. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the device. I unlocked the screen, and the image that loaded made my blood turn to ice. It was a photograph, a grainy, zoomed-in picture taken from a distance, probably from a car window. It showed a little girl in a pink, puffy coat walking out of the gates of an elementary school. She was laughing, holding a drawing in her hand. It was Lily. My granddaughter. My sweet, innocent 7-year-old Lily. Below the image there was a single line of text. Tell your son to pay what he owes, or the girl disappears. I leaned against the rough brick wall of the building, gasping for air. The world tilted. This was no longer just about a greedy wife and a sick husband. This was about monsters. Real monsters who watched children from cars. Monsters who would snatch a little girl to settle a score. I had thought I was fighting a war against Rachel, but I had been blind to the army gathering at the gates. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I called the private investigator back immediately. His name was Miller, a man with a voice like gravel and a cynicism that came from seeing the worst of humanity. I told him about the text. I told him about Lily. Meet me, he said. The diner on 4th Street. 20 minutes. I ran to my truck. I drove like a madman, running 2 red lights, my mind replaying the image of Lily over and over again. When I arrived at the diner, Miller was already there, sitting in a back booth, with a cup of black coffee and a grim expression. I slid into the seat opposite him, slamming the phone down on the table. Who are they? I demanded, my voice trembling with rage. Who is threatening my granddaughter? Miller took a slow sip of his coffee and slid a new folder across the table. It was thicker than the first one. Ben, he said, his voice low. You need to understand something. Your son is not who you think he is. The tech company, the servers, the big clients. It is all smoke and mirrors. I stared at him. What do you mean? I mean, Vale's Tech is a shell, Miller said. It has no revenue. It has no products. It has no clients. The office he rents downtown is empty except for a few computers running automated trading algorithms. Matt isn't an entrepreneur. He is a gambler, a high-stakes, desperate gambler. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. But the house, I stammered. The cars, the lifestyle. Funded by loans, Miller explained. At first it was bank loans, business lines of credit. But when the crypto market crashed last year, he lost everything. He tried to win it back with forex trading. He leveraged himself 10 to 1. He lost that too. When the banks cut him off, he didn't stop. He went to the secondary market. Secondary market. I repeated, though I knew exactly what he meant. Loan sharks, Ben Miller said bluntly. Not the guys who break your thumbs in an alley. These are digital sharks, syndicates operating out of shell companies in Nevada and Delaware. They lend huge sums at 300% interest. And when you don't pay, they don't sue you. They send you pictures of your kids. I opened the folder. It was an autopsy of my son's financial life. Transfers of $50,000 to offshore betting sites. Withdrawals of cash in amounts that triggered federal reporting limits. And at the bottom, the total estimated debt to these hard money lenders. $300,000. $300,000, I whispered. He owes $300,000 to people who threaten children. And that is just the principal, Miller added. With the VIG, the interest, it is probably double that by now. Ben, your son is drowning. He is in a hole so deep he can't see the sky. I sat back, the vinyl seat squeaking beneath me. My son. The boy I raised, to be honest. The boy I sold my house for. He had lied to everyone. He had built a castle on a foundation of quicksand. But something didn't add up. I looked at Miller. If Matt owes them money, why would Rachel kill him? If he dies, the debt doesn't disappear. These people, they will come after his estate. They will come after her. Dead men don't pay debts. Miller nodded slowly. That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or rather, the $5 million question. He pulled out a copy of the insurance policy I had photographed in Rachel's drawer. Think about it, Ben Miller said. Rachel is smart. She handles the books. Do you really think she doesn't know about the debt? She knows. She knows they are broke. She knows the sharks are circling. She knows the house is about to be foreclosed on. She is trapped on a sinking ship. He tapped the paper. But if Matt dies of natural causes, specifically heart failure, the insurance pays out $5 million. $5 million. That is enough to pay off the sharks. It is enough to pay off the mortgage. It is enough to walk away with $4 million in cash. Matt isn't just a husband to her anymore. He is the solution to all their problems. She isn't just killing him for greed. She is killing him to survive. She is liquidating a distressed asset. The logic was cold, brutal, and terrifyingly sound. Rachel wasn't just a black widow. She was a desperate woman trying to buy her way out of a death sentence. She probably figured that if Matt didn't die from the heart condition, the loan sharks would kill him anyway. And if the sharks killed him, the insurance might contest the claim. Or worse, the police would get involved and seize the assets. But a natural death, a tragic heart attack, that was clean. That paid the bills. And Matt, my poor stupid son, he probably didn't even know she was doing it. Or maybe he did. Maybe the stress she kept talking about wasn't work stress. Maybe it was the terror of knowing men were watching his daughter. Maybe he was letting himself die. I looked at the picture of Lily on my phone again. The threat was real. The clock wasn't just ticking on Matt's heart anymore. It was ticking for all of us. I stood up, leaving money on the table. I have to go, I said. Where? Miller asked. To the police. No, I said. If I go to the police, they will freeze Matt's accounts. The sharks will panic. They might hurt Lily just to cut their losses. I can't risk that. Then what are you going to do? Miller asked, concern etching his face. I am going to get my son, I said. I am going to make him tell me the truth. And then I am going to figure out how to pay these bastards off before they touch a hair on my granddaughter's head. I walked out of the diner into the night. The city looked different now. It wasn't just cold and indifferent. It was hostile. Every car passing by could be them. Every shadow could hold a man with a camera. I had thought the enemy was inside the house wearing expensive perfume and yoga clothes. But I was wrong. The enemy was inside, yes. But there was another enemy outside, hungry and violent. And I was just an old man standing between them and my family. I got into my truck and drove toward the mansion. I didn't care about security codes or gates anymore. I was done sneaking around. I was done playing games. My son had made a mess that threatened to destroy us all. And tonight, he was going to answer for it. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I had saved his heart with stolen pills. Now I had to save his life from his own sins, and God help anyone who stood in my way. The engine of my old truck roared like a dying beast as I tore down the highway toward Highland Park. My phone sat on the passenger seat, the screen glowing with a text message from Miller that simply said, "They are moving." 10 minutes out. It was a warning shot. The sharks were not waiting for a wire transfer anymore. They were coming to collect, and the collateral was my granddaughter. I ran a red light, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, a prayer caught in my throat. I had to get there first. I had to get Lily out. I had to get Matt and Rachel out, even if I had to drag them kicking and screaming. I skidded into the driveway of the mansion, the tires carving black lines into the pristine pavement. The house was dark, looming against the night sky like a tomb. I cut the engine and sat for a second listening. No motorcycles yet. No breaking glass. Just the eerie silence of wealth. I grabbed the tire iron from under my seat. It was a crude weapon against professional enforcers, but it was heavy and it was real. I ran to the back door, the one hidden from the street, and pulled out the brass key I had stolen from Rachel. My hands were shaking so bad, I scratched the paint around the lock, but finally it turned. I stepped into the mudroom, the smell of lavender and cleaning products hitting me. I expected to hear the sounds of an invasion. I expected to hear intruders. But what I heard froze the blood in my veins. It was a scream, a raw, guttural scream of pure rage. And it came from the kitchen. It was not a stranger's voice. It was Matt. I moved silently through the hallway. The tire iron raised my heart, hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I reached the edge of the kitchen and peered around the corner. The scene before me made no sense. There were no gangsters. There were no intruders. There was only my son and his wife. Matt was standing by the center island, his back to me. He was wearing a t-shirt and boxer shorts, his hair wild and matted with sweat. In his hand, he gripped a paring knife. The blade caught the dim light from the undercabinet LEDs. He wasn't holding it out in defense. He was advancing on Rachel. Rachel was backed into the corner near the refrigerator, her hands raised in surrender, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. She looked terrified, but not of a burglar. She was terrified of her husband. "Why am I still breathing?" Matt screamed, his voice cracking with a hysteria that sounded like madness. He slammed his free hand onto the granite counter, making the fruit bowl jump. "Answer me, Rachel. It has been a week. I should be dead by now." Rachel sobbed, sliding down the cabinets until she was crouching on the floor. "Matt, please put the knife down. You are scaring me." "I am scaring you." Matt laughed, a high, broken sound. "You know what is scary. What is scary is that those men are coming for Lily. What is scary is that I am still standing here feeling better than I have in years." I went for a run, Rachel. A run. My heart feels strong. Why does my heart feel strong? He took a step closer, pointing the knife at her not to stab, but to accuse. "You promised me," he hissed. "You promised you would switch the pills. You said you gave me the flour. You said you flushed the nitroglycerin. So why am I getting better? Why is my blood pressure normal? Did you lie to me?" I stood in the shadows, my grip on the tire iron loosening as confusion washed over me. This was not the conversation of a victim and a murderer. This was something else entirely. Rachel buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with violent sobs. "I couldn't do it, Matt," she wailed. "I couldn't do it. I tried. I swear I tried. I emptied the capsules. I put the flour in. But then I looked at you sleeping, and you looked so gray, so sick. I panicked. I put some of the real medicine back in. Not all of it. Just enough to keep you going. I thought maybe we could find another way." "Another way," Matt roared, throwing the knife across the room. It clattered harmlessly into the sink, but the violence of the action made Rachel flinch. "There is no other way. Do you think I want to die? Do you think I want to leave you?" "Leave Lily, but I did the math, Rachel. I owe $300,000 to animals who hurt children. We have no assets. The house is underwater. The company is a joke." He grabbed the edge of the counter, leaning over her, his face twisted in agony. "The only thing of value I have left is my life insurance." $5 million, Rachel. $5 million. If I die of a heart attack, if it looks natural, the policy pays out. You pay the sharks. You save the house. Lily goes to college. I am worth more dead than I am alive. Don't you get that? I am the liability. My death is the asset. I felt like the floor had opened up beneath me. I leaned against the wall, fighting the urge to vomit. The narrative I had built in my head, the story of the greedy wife killing the innocent husband, shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. Rachel wasn't the mastermind. She wasn't the villain. She was the executioner, yes, but she had been forced into the role by the victim himself. Matt grabbed a bottle of water from the counter and threw it against the wall. It exploded, water spraying over the expensive appliances. "You were supposed to help me," he cried, tears finally spilling from his eyes, mixing with the sweat on his face. "You were supposed to be strong." We rehearsed this. The Dr. Schneider story. The detox. It was a perfect cover. I stop the meds. My heart gives out. Everyone cries. "You get the check. It was clean. Why did you ruin it? Why did you save me?" "Because I love you, you idiot," Rachel screamed back, finding her voice. She stood up, her expensive dress ruined her face, blotchy and raw. "I love you more than the money. I love you more than this house. I don't want $5 million. I want my husband. I thought I could do it. When you showed me the threats, when you showed me the pictures of Lily, I thought I could let you go to save her. But I can't. I am not a killer, Matt. I am your wife." She grabbed his lapels, shaking him. "We can run. We can sell everything. We can go to the police." "We can't run," Matt sobbed, collapsing into her arms, all the fight draining out of him. "They will find us. They will find Lily. I messed up, Rach. I messed up so bad. I just wanted to give you everything. I wanted to be the man you deserved. And now I have dug a grave so deep the only way out is to fill it with myself." They held each other in the middle of the kitchen, two broken people in $1 million house weeping over a tragedy of their own making. I watched them and I saw the truth. My son wasn't a victim of greed. He was a victim of his own pride. He had gambled away his life to buy a fantasy, and when the bill came due, he decided the only honorable thing to do was to sacrifice himself. It was twisted. It was sick. But in a terrible way, it was done out of love. And Rachel, the woman I had demonized, the woman I thought looked at me with disdain. She had been carrying the weight of his death wish for months. She had been playing the role of the holistic nutjob, the controlling wife, all to cover for his suicide plan. She had walked a tightrope between saving her daughter from gangsters and saving her husband from himself. And in the end, her love had made her fail. She couldn't kill him. She had tried to keep him just sick enough to satisfy him, but just alive enough to keep hoping. I looked at the tire iron in my hand. It felt heavy and useless. I didn't need a weapon. I needed a father. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the amber bottle I had taken from the closet days ago. The bottle filled with the real pills. I stepped out of the shadows and into the light of the kitchen. My boots made a heavy sound on the marble floor. Matt and Rachel spun around, gasping. Rachel looked terrified. Matt looked like he had seen a ghost. "Dad," Matt whispered, wiping his eyes. How did you get in?" I didn't answer. I walked past them to the center island. I raised my hand and slammed the bottle of pills onto the granite counter. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. The plastic cracked, but the bottle held. Cut the act, I said, my voice low and steady, hiding the trembling in my knees. I heard everything. Matt stared at the bottle, then at me. His face crumpled. You know, he said, his voice barely audible. I know that you are a damn fool, Matthew, I said, my voice rising. I know that you think your life is a commodity to be traded. I know that you bullied your wife into becoming an accomplice to suicide. I looked at Rachel. She was trembling, waiting for my judgment. And I know that you, I said to her, softening my tone, are not the monster I thought you were. You are just a woman who didn't know how to say no to a man who wanted to die. I pointed a calloused finger at Matt. You think you are worth $5 million dead, I said. Well, let me tell you something. To me, you are priceless alive. You think you are saving Lily. You are abandoning her. You are leaving her with a legacy of a father who took the coward's way out. Matt flinched as if I had slapped him. Dad, you don't understand. The debt is money, I shouted. Money is paper. You can burn paper. You can't burn a father and get him back. I took a breath, the rage mixing with a sorrow so deep it felt like drowning. The sharks are coming, Matt. I got the message too. They are on their way, so we don't have time for your suicide pacts. We don't have time for tears. I picked up the tire iron and held it up. We are going to fight, I said. We are going to protect this house. And tomorrow we are going to fix this mess. But nobody dies tonight. Not on my watch. Matt looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years. He didn't see the poor old man who embarrassed him. He saw his father. He saw the man who raised him. He nodded slowly, wiping his face. Okay, Dad, he whispered. Okay. Rachel let out a sob of relief and leaned against the counter. I walked over to the back door and locked the deadbolt. Then I turned to them. Get Lily, I said. Bring her downstairs. We stay together. And Matt, take a real pill. You are going to need your heart for what comes next. The sound of the knife hitting the marble floor echoed through the cavernous kitchen, like a judge's gavel ending a sentence. My son, the man I had raised to be strong, to be honest, to be better than me, crumbled before my eyes. His knees gave way, hitting the hard tile with a sickening thud, and he curled into himself, burying his face in his hands. The sobbing that racking his body was not the weeping of a man who had been caught doing something wrong. It was the weeping of a child who had been carrying a weight too heavy for his shoulders and had finally mercifully let it drop. Rachel stood frozen against the refrigerator, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and relief. She looked at me, then at Matt, and for the first time I saw the immense burden she had been carrying. She wasn't a co-conspirator. She was a hostage to her husband's despair. I walked over to Matt. He looked so small down there, huddled in his expensive pajamas in his $1 million kitchen. I reached down and touched his shoulder. His muscles were rock hard, tense with adrenaline and fear. Matt, I said softly, look at me. He shook his head violently, refusing to lift his face. I can't. He choked out, his voice thick with mucus and tears. I can't look at you, Dad. Not after what I did. Not after I failed you. You didn't fail me, son, I said, though I didn't yet understand the full scope of what he meant. Yes, I did, he screamed into his palms. You don't get it. You don't get why I did this. It wasn't for the lifestyle, Dad. It wasn't for the cars or the house. It was for you. I froze. For me. What was he talking about? Matt finally looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with red, filled with a pain so raw it was hard to witness. He scrambled to his knees, grabbing the hem of my dusty work jacket like a beggar asking for alms. I saw you, Dad, he whispered, the words tumbling out in a rush. About 6 months ago, I was driving past the construction site on 4th Street. I saw you carrying those cement bags. I saw you eating a cold sandwich on a pile of bricks. You looked so old. You looked so tired. And I knew you were doing it because you gave me everything. You gave me your retirement. You gave me your house. You gave me your life." He took a ragged breath, his chest heaving. "I wanted to pay you back," he said, his voice breaking. "I wanted to give you the $200,000 back. I wanted to buy you a house. I wanted you to stop working. I tried the business, but it was too slow. The margins were too thin. So I tried to invest. I thought if I could just double the money quickly, I could set you up. I could be the son you deserved." I listened in stunned silence. The road to hell, they say, is paved with good intentions. My son had paved his road with love for me. "I started with crypto." Matt continued, his voice speeding up, manic. "It worked at first. I made $50,000 in a week. I thought I had found the answer. So I leveraged. I borrowed. I thought one more big win, and I can hand Dad a check for $1 million. I can tell him to retire. But then the market turned. It all vanished overnight. I tried to win it back. I went to the Forex sites. I went to the online casinos. I kept thinking just one hand, just one trade. And then I was in a hole so deep I couldn't see the light." He looked at Rachel, who was weeping silently in the corner. "The sharks came calling," he said, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper. "They threatened the business. Then they threatened the house. Then they threatened Lily. I had nothing left, Dad. No money, no assets, just debt and shame. I couldn't tell you. How could I tell you that I took your sacrifice and burned it? How could I look you in the eye and tell you that your gift destroyed us?" He reached into the pocket of his pajama bottoms and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It was damp with his sweat. He smoothed it out on the floor with trembling fingers. It was the beneficiary page of the insurance policy. I looked at it. I saw the names. 50% to Rachel Vales and Lily Vales. 50% to Benjamin Coleman. He tapped my name with a shaking finger. "This was the only way, Dad," he said, looking at me with a twisted, tragic hope. I did the math. If I live, I am a burden. I am a danger to my daughter. I am a failure who cost his father everything. But if I die right, you get $2.5 million. Rachel gets $2.5 million. The sharks get paid. You get your retirement. Lily goes to college. Everyone wins." He looked at me, pleading for me to understand his logic. "I am worth more dead than alive, Dad," he said. "It is just economics. I sold the house for you. I have to pay you back. I have to pay you back with my life. It is the only asset I have left." The silence that filled the kitchen was heavy, suffocating. I looked at the paper. I looked at my son. I looked at the boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knee, who used to ask me to check under his bed for monsters. Now he had become the monster to save us all. He had twisted the concept of filial piety into a suicide pact. He thought his life was a transaction. He thought my love was an investment that required a return. A wave of emotion crashed over me. It wasn't anger. It was a grief so profound it felt like physical pain. It was the realization that I had failed him, not by not giving him enough money, but by not making him understand his own worth. I felt my hand move before I made the conscious decision to do it. Smack! The sound of my open palm hitting his cheek was sharp and loud, echoing off the marble and steel. Matt's head snapped to the side. Rachel gasped. Matt froze, his hand coming up to his stinging cheek. He looked at me shocked. I had never hit him. Not once in his life. Not when he broke my tools, not when he crashed my car. I grabbed him by the shoulders of his t-shirt and hauled him to his feet. He was taller than me now, broader, but in that moment he was small. I shook him hard. "You are an idiot," I shouted, my voice raw and cracking. "You are a damn fool, Matthew Coleman." I shook him again, tears streaming down my own face, now hot and angry. "Do you think I sold that house for money?" I yelled, getting right in his face. "Do you think I worked in the cold and the rain and the dirt because I wanted a return on investment? I did it for you. I did it so you could live. I did it so you could breathe. I did it so I could see you grow old and raise your daughter." I let go of one shoulder to point at the insurance paper on the floor. "That paper is not a gift," I spat. "That paper is a death warrant. You think $2.5 million is going to replace my son? You think I can hug a check? You think I can go fishing with a bank balance?" I grabbed his face in both of my rough, calloused hands, forcing him to look at me. "I don't want your money, Matt. I never wanted your money. I don't care if we live in a cardboard box. I don't care if we eat beans for the rest of our lives. I sold my past to buy your future, not your funeral. Do you understand me? I bought you life, and you do not have the right to throw it away. Not for me. Not for anyone." Matt stared at me, his lip trembling. The wall of logic he had built, the cold calculus of his suicide plans, crumbled under the weight of my words. He saw the horror of what he had almost done. He saw that his sacrifice would not have been a gift, but the ultimate betrayal. "Dad," he whispered, his voice breaking into a sob. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry." I pulled him into my arms. I hugged him with all the strength I had left in my old body. I held him like I held him when he was a baby, trying to shield him from the world. He collapsed against me, weeping uncontrollably, soaking my shirt with his tears. Rachel crawled over to us, wrapping her arms around Matt's waist, burying her face in his back. We stood there in the kitchen, a tangled knot of three broken people, crying for the time we had lost, for the lies we had told, for the love that had almost destroyed us. It felt like a release. It felt like the end of the nightmare. But then, over the sound of our weeping, I heard it. It was a low rumble, at first growing louder and closer. The sound of heavy engines. Motorcycles. Multiple engines cutting through the quiet suburban night. They were not passing by. They were slowing down. I lifted my head, pulling away from Matt. The warm, emotional fog in the kitchen evaporated instantly, replaced by the cold, sharp clarity of danger. "They are here," I whispered. Matt froze. Rachel looked up, her eyes wide with terror. "The sharks," Matt breathed. "They weren't just figures on a spreadsheet anymore. They weren't just text messages. They were outside." The $300,000 debt had arrived at the front door, and it didn't care about our reconciliation. It didn't care about love. It only cared about payment. I looked at the clock on the oven. It was almost midnight. We had run out of time. The emotional battle was over, but the physical one was just beginning. I looked at my son, wiping the tears from his face. "Pull yourself together," I said, my voice hardening into steel. "We are done crying. Now we have to survive." The silence that followed the cutting of the motorcycle engines was heavier than the noise itself. It was a suffocating, predatory silence. Then came the sound of heavy boots crunching on the gravel of the driveway. Not one pair. 4. Maybe 5. They weren't rushing. They were walking with the slow, deliberate pace of men who know they have already won. Matt moved toward the door, his face pale, the false courage of his suicide plan replaced by the raw terror of a father whose child is in danger. I grabbed his arm, my grip bruising. "Stay here," I hissed. "Do not open that door." A heavy fist pounded against the mahogany wood. It wasn't a knock. It was a demand. It shook the frame of the house. "Open up, Vales," a voice boomed from the other side. It was deep, calm, and terrifying. "We know you are in there. We know your daughter is upstairs. Don't make us come up and get her." Rachel let out a strangled whimper, clapping her hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. Matt looked at me, his eyes wide and wet. "Dad," he whispered, "I have to go out there. If I go out, maybe they will leave Lily alone. They won't. I said, my mind racing. If you go out there, they will break you. And then they will come inside anyway because they don't want blood. They want their money. I looked at the clock. It was midnight. The police were 15 minutes away even if I called right now. 15 minutes was an eternity. In 15 minutes, these men could burn this house to the ground. I needed a miracle. I needed $300,000 in the next 3 minutes. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old flip phone. My thumb hovered over the contacts list. There was only one name, only one person I knew who had that kind of liquid cash and the power to move it instantly. Frank. Frank Russo was a legend in Chicago construction. He was a billionaire developer who had built half the skyline. He was also the meanest, stingiest, most vindictive son of a gun I had ever met. I had worked for him as a foreman 20 years ago. We had parted ways screaming at each other in a trailer office because I refused to use substandard steel in a foundation. He had called me a self-righteous fool. I had called him a crook. I hadn't spoken to him since, but he was the only card I had left to play. I dialed the number. I still remembered it by heart. It rang, and rang, and rang. Outside, the pounding started again, louder this time, accompanied by the sound of something metal hitting the door handle. "Pick up, Frank," I whispered, sweat stinging my eyes. I jaw. "Pick up, you old bastard." "Hello?" The voice was groggy, irritated like a bear poked in its den. "Who is this?" "It is Ben," I said, my voice trembling. "Ben Coleman." There was a pause, a long, heavy pause. Ben Coleman. Frank grunted. The only foreman stupid enough to walk away from a 6-figure job because of a few rebars. "You have some nerve calling me at midnight. You finally calling to apologize." "I am calling to beg Frank," I said, and the words tasted like bile. "I am calling because I need help. I need money." Frank let out a short, harsh laugh. "Money? You?" The man who said his integrity was worth more than gold. "How much?" "5 grand. 10. 300,000, I said. The line went silent. I could hear him breathing. Outside, the glass pane of the side window shattered. Rachel screamed. "Did you hear me, Frank?" I shouted into the phone, desperation cracking my voice. "I need $300,000, right now, tonight, or my family dies." "You are in trouble, Ben," Frank said, his voice losing the mockery. "Serious trouble. Why should I give you a dime? You walked out on me. You insulted me." "Because I will sell you my life," I said, dropping to my knees on the cold kitchen floor. I wasn't just speaking to Frank anymore. I was speaking to the universe. I was offering up the last thing I owned, my freedom. "Frank, listen to me," I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. "If you do this, if you transfer this money, I am yours. I will work for you until the day I drop dead. I will watch your sights. I will be your night watchman. I will sweep your floors. I will do the jobs no one else wants. I won't take a salary. I won't take a day off. I am 70 years old, Frank, but I am strong. I have maybe 10 good years left. I am giving them all to you. I am signing over the rest of my life. Just save my son." The silence that followed was agonizing. It stretched out for 10 seconds, 20. I heard the front door groan as a shoulder slammed against it. "Why?" Frank asked quietly. "Why should I trust you? You hate me. You think I am a crook. Why should I believe you will actually show up and work for free? Why should I believe you won't take the money and run?" I closed my eyes. I thought about the bento box. I thought about the flour pills. I thought about the tire iron in my hand. "Because in 40 years, Frank," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, "in 40 years of working in this dirty city, I have never taken a penny that wasn't mine. I have never stolen a tool. I have never padded a timesheet. I have never broken a promise. You know that. That is why you hated me, because I was honest. I heard a sigh on the other end, a heavy, resigned sigh. Who are they? Frank asked. I don't know, I said. Digital sharks, hard money lenders. Give me the number, Frank commanded. Not your son's number. The number that texted you. The number that sent the threat. I read it to him, my voice shaking. Hang up, Frank said. And Ben, be at the site on 5th Avenue tomorrow at 6 p.m. Wear a uniform. You belong to me now. The line went dead. I lowered the phone, my hand numb. I looked at Matt. He was staring at the door, the tire iron I had given him held loosely in his hand. Dad, he whispered. What did you do? I bought us time, I said, though I wasn't sure if it was true. Crash. The front door splintered. Wood flew into the hallway. Heavy boots stomped onto the marble entry. 3 men walked into the light of the kitchen. They were big. They wore leather jackets and helmets with tinted visors. They carried baseball bats. Matt stepped in front of Rachel. I stepped in front of Matt. Which one is Vales? The lead man asked. His voice was muffled by the helmet, mechanical and cold. I am Matt, said his voice shaking, but standing his ground. The man raised the bat. He took a step forward. I raised my own tire iron, knowing it was futile, knowing I was an old man fighting a machine. But then a sound cut through the tension. It was a distinct electronic chime. Not from my phone. Not from Matt's. It came from the pocket of the lead attacker. He paused, the bat hovering in the air. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone. He looked at the screen. He froze. He tapped the screen, reading something. Then he looked up at us, or rather at me. He lowered the phone slowly. Then he lowered the bat. He didn't say a word. He just turned to the other 2 men and jerked his head toward the door. Let's go, he said. What? One of the other men asked, confused. We just got in. We are paid, the leader said, in full, plus a premium for the inconvenience. And we got a message from the top. This house is off limits. Permanently. He looked at me one last time through the dark visor. You have powerful friends, old man, he said. You are lucky. They turned and walked out, just like that. The boots crunched on the glass. The front door was left hanging on its hinges. We heard the motorcycles fire up a roar that faded into the distance until there was nothing left but the silence of the night and the sound of our own ragged breathing. I dropped the tire iron. It clattered loudly on the floor. My legs gave out, and I sat down hard on the kitchen island stool. I put my head in my hands. It was over. The sharks were gone. My son was alive. My granddaughter was safe. But as the adrenaline faded, a new reality settled in. I had saved them, yes. But I had sold myself. I was no longer a free man. I was no longer retired. I was a servant to a man I despised, bound by a debt that would take the rest of my life to repay. Matt walked over to me. He touched my arm gently. Dad, he said, tears welling in his eyes again. What just happened? Who did you call? I looked up at him. I saw the relief in his face, the hope returning, and I knew it was worth it. I called an old friend, I lied, forcing a tired smile. Just an old friend. I didn't tell him the price. I didn't tell him that his father, the man who had always been his own master, was now a slave to a debt of honor. That was my burden to carry. I stood up, my back aching, my heart heavy but full. Go check on Lily, I told them. Lock the doors. We have a lot of work to do tomorrow. I walked out of the broken door into the cold night air. That night, nobody slept. The adrenaline that had sustained us crashed, leaving behind a silence that was heavier than the debt I had just taken on. I stayed in the driveway in my truck, watching the house like a sentinel, while inside the lights stayed on in every room. I knew what they were doing. They were saying goodbye to a ghost. When the sun finally clawed its way over the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange, the front door opened. Matt walked out first. He wasn't carrying electronics or jewelry. He was carrying 2 cardboard boxes filled with clothes and Lily's toys. Rachel followed him. She had wiped off the smeared makeup, her face clean and pale. She was carrying a single suitcase. She stopped at the threshold of that magnificent cursed door. She didn't look back at the grand foyer or the crystal chandelier. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the brass key, the one I had stolen and copied, and placed it gently on the porch railing. It was a surrender. I got out of the truck as they walked down the long driveway. Matt looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed but clear for the first time in years. He looked at my truck, then back at the mansion. "It's just stuff, isn't it, Dad?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "All of it. The marble, the leather, the address. It was just a costume I was wearing to make myself feel tall." "A man is measured by his word, son, not his wallet," I replied, leaning against the rusted fender of my truck. "You are taller now standing here with nothing than you ever were inside that house." Rachel walked up to us. She looked at the tire iron still sitting on my passenger seat. She reached out and took my rough hand in hers. Her grip was firm. "We are going to pay you back, Ben," she said. "Not just the money. We are going to pay back the faith. I promise you I will never let him forget what you did tonight." "Just take care of him," I said, "and take care of Lily. That is all the payment I need." We stood there for a moment as the morning traffic began to hum in the distance. 3 people standing in the wreckage of a fortune, but the foundation of a family. They got into their car to drive to the foreclosure office, and I got into my truck to drive to the job site. We were broke. We were homeless. We were exhausted. But as I watched them drive away, I realized the air tasted different. It tasted clean. The suffocating weight of the lie was gone, replaced by the sharp, cold reality of truth. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the future. I had to go home. I had to get my uniform ready. I had a shift to start. The house was the first thing to go, and it went fast. We did not wait for the foreclosure notices or the banks to come knocking. We liquidated everything. The marble tables, the abstract art, the Italian leather sofas that were too hard to sit on. It was a fire sale of a life that never really existed. When the auction sign went up on the manicured lawn, it felt less like a defeat and more like a cleansing. The $300,000 was wired to the account Frank gave me, and just like that, the sharks swam away back into the dark, digital ocean from which they came. But the debt to Frank remained. A debt of honor. A debt of labor. Matt did not protest when I drove him to the rehabilitation center 3 days later. It was not a luxury spa in Malibu with ocean views and yoga classes. It was a state-funded facility in Wisconsin, a place with linoleum floors and strict rules. He needed to break the addiction that had nearly killed him. He needed to learn that his value as a man was not tied to a bank balance or a crypto wallet. I watched him walk through those double doors carrying a small duffel bag, and for the first time in years, he walked with his head up. He was terrified, but he was facing it. He was done running. Rachel surprised me the most. I expected her to run. I expected her to file for divorce the moment the money vanished. But she stayed. She sold the Birkin bag that I had once fished her keys out of. She sold the shoes with the red soles. She sold the jewelry. She used the money to put a deposit on a 2-bedroom apartment in a brick walk up 3 blocks from my basement. It was old. The radiator clanked and the view was of an alleyway, but it was warm. She got a job as a cashier at the local grocery store. The woman who used to spend $5,000 on a handbag was now scanning coupons and bagging vegetables for minimum wage. And strange as it seems, she looked lighter. The mask of perfection had cracked and fallen away, leaving behind a woman who was tired but real. A year passes faster than you think when you are working double shifts. It is November again in Chicago. The wind is howling off the lake, carrying the same biting cold that started this whole story. I am 71 years old now. My joints are stiffer. My back has a permanent curve to it like an old tree bent by the storm. I am wearing a gray uniform with a patch on the sleeve that says Russo Construction. I am the night watchman at Frank's newest high-rise project downtown. I sit in the little guard booth surrounded by the skeleton of a skyscraper that is reaching for the clouds. It is 8 o'clock at night. The city is a sea of lights around me, but inside the fence it is just me and the concrete and the silence. My shift ends at 6 in the morning. I do this 6 nights a week. I sweep. I check the locks. I walk the perimeter. I am paying off my debt 1 hour at a time. Headlights sweep across the gravel lot. An old Ford pickup truck rumbles toward the gate. It is not a luxury car. It has a dent in the fender and rust on the bumper. I smile as I press the button to lift the gate. The truck parks near the booth. The doors open. Matt steps out. He looks different. He is filled out. The gray pallor of sickness and stress is gone, replaced by a healthy, ruddy complexion from working outdoors. He is wearing work boots and a tool belt slung over his shoulder. He finished his rehab 6 months ago and started an apprenticeship as an electrician. He is starting from the bottom, pulling wire and installing outlets, but he is good at it. He is building something real with his hands, just like I did. "Hey, Dad," he calls out, his voice carrying over the wind. Behind him, Rachel climbs out. She is wearing a simple wool coat and a knit hat. No diamonds, no silk. She looks beautiful. She is holding Lily's hand. My granddaughter is a year older, taller, missing a front tooth, and bundled up in a puffy jacket. Grandpa Lily screams, running toward me. I step out of the booth and catch her, my old back protesting, but my heart singing. I swing her around and set her down. "What are you doing here this late?" I ask, though I know the answer. I know they come every Tuesday. It is our new ritual. "We brought you dinner," Rachel says, holding up a plastic bag. It is not from a high-end bistro. It is a reusable grocery bag. "Come inside," I say, ushering them into the small, heated booth. It is cramped with 4 of us in there, but nobody minds. We sit on the folding chairs and the overturned milk crates I keep for them. Matt unpacks the food. He pulls out a plastic container. It is not a black lacquered bento box. It is a simple Tupperware container scratched from use. He pops the lid. Steam rises up, filling the small space with the smell of savory goodness. It is braised pork with potatoes and carrots, slow cooked, simple, hearty. Beside it is a container of boiled broccoli and white rice. "Rachel made it," Matt says proudly. "She is getting really good with the crockpot." I take the plastic fork. I take a bite. The meat falls apart. It is hot and salty, and it tastes like love. It tastes like salvation. I look at them. I look at my son, who is eating a sandwich he packed for himself, laughing as Lily tries to steal his pickle. I look at Rachel, who is wiping a smudge of dirt off Matt's cheek with her thumb, her eyes soft and full of affection. I look at Lily, who is safe, who is happy, who will never know how close she came to disappearing. The world outside sees an old man in a cheap security uniform, eating leftovers in a construction site. They see a man who lost his retirement, who lost his home, who has to work until he dies. They look at me and they see a failure. They see a tragedy. But I look around this booth and I see something else entirely. I lost my money, yes. I lost the easy twilight years of sitting in a rocking chair. I am carrying a debt that will likely outlive me. I am tired. My bones hurt. I am a servant to a man I once despised. But look at them. My son is alive. His heart is beating strong, not because of a lie, but because he found the truth. He is not a millionaire, but he is a man. He is a father. He is a husband. My daughter-in-law has learned the value of $1 and the value of a soul. She is not a hollow shell anymore. She is a partner. She is a mother. And my granddaughter. She is here. She is safe. I take another bite of the stew. It is the best meal I have ever had. Better than sushi. Better than steak. I swallowed the food and felt the warmth spread through my chest. I saved his life, I thought to myself. I didn't just save his heart. I saved his soul. I broke him down to build him back up, just like this building rising around us. I look at Matt, and he catches my eye. He smiles. It is a real smile, not the manic grin of a gambler on a winning streak. It is the calm, steady smile of a man who knows who he is. "Thanks, Dad," he says softly, "for everything." Just as we were packing up the empty Tupperware containers, a pair of blinding white headlights cut through the darkness of the construction site, far brighter than Matt's old truck. A sleek black limousine crunched over the gravel and came to a stop right in front of my guard booth. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew that car. It belonged to Frank Russo. Panic flared in my chest. I was strictly forbidden from having visitors on the site. If Frank saw my family here having a picnic in his security booth, he could fire me on the spot. If I lost this job, I broke my word, and the deal was off. "Stay here," I whispered to Matt, my voice tight. I stepped out into the freezing wind, zipping my thin jacket up to my chin. The back door of the limo opened, and Frank stepped out. He was leaning heavily on a cane, his breath puffing out in clouds of white vapor. He wore a cashmere coat that probably cost more than my son's entire debt. He looked at me, then looked past me into the brightly lit booth where Rachel was wiping Lily's face. "I am sorry, Frank," I said quickly, lowering my head. "They were just leaving. It won't happen again. I am watching the perimeter. Everything is secure." Frank didn't answer immediately. He limped closer in his Italian leather shoes, navigating the mud and debris. He stopped 2 feet from me and peered into the booth. Matt stood up, instinctively moving in front of his wife and daughter, his eyes wary. "So," Frank grunted, his voice like grinding stones. "That is the boy." "Yes," I said. "That is Matt." Frank stared at Matt for a long moment. He looked at the cheap work clothes, the calloused hands, the tired but clear eyes. Then he looked at the plastic container of stew on the table. "He looks different than the pictures in the papers," Frank said. "He looks like a man who knows the weight of a dollar." "He is learning, Frank," I said. "We all are." Frank turned his gaze back to me. His eyes were hard, the eyes of a man who had crushed competitors for 40 years. But there was something else there tonight. Something I hadn't seen in him since we were young men working on the same framing crew. Respect. "You are a fool, Ben," Frank said softly. "You sold your freedom for a kid who gambled it away. You are working 12-hour shifts in the cold when you should be resting." "I am doing what a father does," I replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. "And I am paying my debt, every cent, every hour." Frank reached into his coat pocket. I tensed, wondering if he was handing me a termination notice. Instead, he pulled out a thick envelope. "It is a bonus," Frank said, shoving it into my chest, "for catching that copper theft last week. Don't think this changes our deal. You still owe me 3 years. But get the kid a better coat. It is going to be a cold winter." He turned and limped back to his car before I could say a word. As the driver opened the door, Frank looked back one last time. "You are the poorest man I know, Ben," he called out over the wind. "But tonight, looking at that booth, I think I might be jealous." The limousine drove away, disappearing into the city lights. I looked inside the envelope. It was $500. Not a fortune, but enough. I walked back into the booth. Matt looked at me, questions in his eyes. "Who was that?" he asked. "That," I said, putting the money in the jar we kept for Lily's college fund, "was a man who just realized that money can't buy what we have in this room." I sat back down, surrounded by the smell of stew and the warmth of my family. The wind howled outside, trying to tear down the steel skeleton of the skyscraper, but it couldn't touch us. We were built of stronger stuff now. We were built of truth. I gnawed, feeling a lump in my throat. I realized then that I didn't lose anything that mattered. I traded paper for blood. I traded comfort for life. And as a father, I know one thing for certain. That was the best deal I ever made. It was the bargain of a lifetime. I leaned back in my creaky chair, surrounded by my family in the middle of a cold Chicago night. The wind howls outside, but in here, it is warm. I smile. It is a toothless, tired smile, but it is the brightest smile I have worn since the day my son was born. I am the richest man in the world. I learned that true wealth isn't found in bank accounts or mansions. It is found in the quiet moments of connection, in the safety of those you love, and in the peace of an honest day's work. My son chased a shortcut to happiness and nearly lost his soul, but he found his way back through the dignity of labor and truth. We lost the fortune we thought we needed to gain the family we actually wanted. Love is not about what you can buy for someone. It is about what you are willing to sacrifice to save them. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe and tell me in the comments. What is the greatest sacrifice you have ever made for the ones you love?